Hi, everybody, and welcome to this very exciting launch event for Ride Cymru. It's very, very exciting to see so many of you dialing in from around the UK and around the world. Do let us know where you're joining from in the chat. My name's Ed. I'm a member of the team here at Threshold Sports, the organisation behind Ride Cymru and Ride Across Britain, which I'm sure is an event many of you are familiar with. And today I'm really lucky to be joined by a couple of special guests to talk about this new event. I've got Nick Tuppen, who is the CEO of Threshold Sports and a familiar face, I'm sure, to many of you who have taken on one of our events before, and Jasmijn Muller, who is a cycle coach who has ridden some of the toughest events out there, some of the toughest unsupported rides. She also took on Ride Across Britain with us last year. And Jasmijn is also based in the Brecon Beacons, so very well placed to talk about all things Welsh cycling. Nick and Jasmijn, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Pleasure.
In this webinar, we're going to be diving a little bit into the why, the what, and the how of Ride Cymru, the latest event from Threshold Sports. We're going to be having a bit of a Q&A as well towards the end. But I think for this audience in particular, it's useful to just kick things off with a bit of a discussion of Ride Cymru and how it relates to Ride Across Britain, which is an event that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Nick, if I could start with you. You've been at Threshold for a number of years now. You've worked on multiple Ride Across Britain events. Where does Ride Cymru sit in relation to that event?
So Ride Cymru is kind of standing on the shoulders of RAB to a large extent. Like RAB was the foundation event of Threshold, the mantra which we would have talked to people on every single RAB and every event that we do around More is in You. The event was the encapsulation of pretty much all that is great about that mantra and the events we do. So the challenge of riding from one end of the country to the other, the experience of doing it with a whole load of people, being out in all weathers, the challenge, the journey, the whole kind of all-encompassing multi-sensory experience that RAB was, has just been kind of foundational to us as a business. The kind of encapsulation or trying to sum up what that is for different people is actually very different. It's very, we've got an image of a medal here because to trying to come up with one image which encapsulates RAB is not impossible, because one person's experience at one end of the field or the back end of the field or 1 year to the other or one stage to the other is all totally different. But there was something in common with pretty much everyone who did that event, is they had a kind of an urge to go back and recapture some of that spirit. Lots of people came back twice, 3 times, get their golden jersey, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and more in certain cases. But for every person who came back and rode RAB again and looked to recapture that magic of the bubble through doing the same experience, there was 10 for every one going, what's next, what's different, what else can we do which recaptures that? And within that as well, the common theme which came through was, is there an option which isn't necessarily as big a commitment of time, as big a commitment to training, financially as big a commitment as well? And so that we've always had, pretty much since the first year of RAB back in 2010, we've had a desire to find a sister event to RAB. And one of the questions which came through in advance is, what's this actually mean for RAB as a main event? The reality for us at the moment is that RAB in its original form is incredibly difficult to do commercially. Post-COVID, costs have gone up around 30%, and the entry fees we don't think would be able to carry an extra 30%, and certainly that sponsorship side as well is incredibly tough in the current economic climate. So in answer to the question of, is this an instead of, this is an alongside, on the hope that we will one day be able to bring RAB back. But for us as a business at the moment, Ride Cymru is our main area of focus. And for people who are kind of asking about 2026, this is going to be our focus for the next couple of years. But at the same time, we have a space for RAB as soon as we're able to get that commercial model to work. So it's a search for a worthy successor and a sequel and a sister event. And the challenge we set ourselves is, how do you capture all that magic but in a more accessible format? So that's what set us hunting across the UK, and quite quickly drew us towards Wales as a landscape for that event.
Yeah, well said. I can see a lot of people in the chats talking about the rabs that they've done. I'm sure there's many incredible memories that we could all reflect upon. But I'm really excited to share this next slide in particular, because I believe this is the first time we've shared a map of this new event. So drum roll, please. Let's take a look. So let's talk about the what. Let's talk about what Ride Cymru is. This is obviously a high level overview of the route. We've had a few questions in advance about the distances and the elevations involved, and you can see those on your screen now. Nick, if I come back to you, you talked about the process of creating an alternative sister event to RAB. I guess the opening question is, why Wales? What was it that you and the team were looking for when you were stitching this route together?
So part of it, and part of what we like to do in our events is have a story and a sense of completion. So the multi-day element of the events are great because they foster that community and you're away together completing this challenge. But there's something about an A to B journey which is inspiring, it's romantic, it captures the imagination. So we wanted an A to B and a coast to coast as a classic. And then we started looking, like I said, within the UK at kind of these places which are incredible for cycling, but maybe aren't that easy to access or aren't that well known. So when we started looking at a route, we had 3 days in the back of our mind. We looked at Wales, and this idea of a north coast to south coast fitted that narrative. But then within it, when we started digging into the locations, the places, like lots of people will know areas of Wales. They might know Cardiff, they might know Pembrokeshire, they might know Snowdonia, Eryri, they might know the Gower, but in amongst that central part of Wales, there's all this incredible riding. Kind of first and foremost, we were looking for brilliant riding, but also the landscapes are amazing, the history is amazing, the basically story of Wales is held within that wild heart. And so with that journey from A to B, from Llandudno up at the top down to Cardiff, it gave us flexibility to not necessarily take the most direct route, but use that same approach that we had on RAB of trying to find these little hidden roads, these hidden stories, these hidden places. So those things all combined into developing this route. And quite quickly on the recce that we did, we felt like we were onto something which has the quality to actually stack up and be a worthy successor to RAB. Within the first few miles of leaving the planned start line in Llandudno, we've got views and you've got riding which is going to make people want to stop, take their photo out. I'll be sending it home, as well as all the testing ups and downs. So it was wanting the flexibility, it was wanting a story, it was wanting a landscape that was worthy of taking everyone there. But the reason we took that route through the centre is to try and unlock these places which people wouldn't usually go.
Yeah, you talk about hidden gems. I mean, I believe this photo on the next slide is actually from like the first mile or two of the route. So
yeah,
people will be able to see just how quickly it gets epic. There's a few people in the chat pointing out some of the numbers on screen and how large they are.
yeah,
For past RAB riders, these are slightly less intimidating distances, perhaps. It's less typically on RAB, we were looking at 100 plus miles a day, but obviously the elevation involved is significant, matching or even exceeding some of the tougher days. So maybe could you talk a bit to that and the challenge that might present?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I wouldn't be looking at those mileages and thinking, hold on, this is kind of 3/4 of a RAB stage, therefore it needs 3/4 of the training. This is 3 challenging, hard days of riding. The original plan was we were going to try and get a kind of queen stage in the middle where we're going to get over 100 miles, but very quickly you realize that the topography and also the style of the roads as well is such that you don't have long sections where you'll eat through 15, 20, 25 miles in the peloton. This is beautiful climbs, it's amazing ascents. And by having those kind of shorter distances, it enables us to take potentially some of these slower roads. But, I was going to say we'll be encouraging people to take their time over this. I think anyone who's looking at the the profile on the bottom or looking at the elevation, taking your time may not necessarily be a choice on this. We think it's a great balance mileage-wise of full hard days riding, but not pushing up the mileages to kind of 95, 100 to the extent that you get to those base camps absolutely broken. So it feels like on a par with RAB stages in terms of physicality, but obviously we don't have 9 of them in a row to have to take on.
Jasmine, I'd love to know, you've ridden all around the world, but Wales has been your home for a number of years now. What is it that you think makes cycling in Wales so special?
When I was looking to relocate out of London, having, as you say, cycled in a lot of places, Wales for me was the obvious choice, just because it's got so much variety. Even I live in Brecon, or just outside of Brecon. Even in the Brecon Beacons, if you compare the west, which is quite kind of open and remote, the central area is, of course, what draws all the tourists. If you know Penafan and Cribin in the kind of dramatic mountains, and then the rolling hills in the east. But you've got a lot of variety, and yeah, it does look hilly, the route profile, no doubt, but it's also very, very rewarding. And I'm saying that coming from the Netherlands, where I used to hate hills and only ride on the flats, and I've turned into a complete hill lover just by the fact that I live here, and it's so beautiful. I think when you look at that last day, yeah, going up the Gospel Pass is it's a big climb. It's steep, and we get to the highest point there, but it's very rewarding with the views on the top. And that descent is amazing. It just goes on and on and on. For any past rabbers, it's probably a little bit like, when you've gone up the tumble and then that amazing descent afterwards, that just keeps giving. It's a bit like that. And what Nick said, whilst there is no Queen stage, maybe in terms of distance, I think day 2 might be the Queen stage in terms of scenery and that real feeling of being like so remote and just surrounded by nature. From that point of view, I think that will be a Queen stage.
Yeah, I think the UK is not necessarily a place that a lot of people associate with wilderness and sort of wide open spaces, but it's incredible how empty that central part of Wales is. I've seen a few people in the chat asking for some names. Obviously, this map is a little bit abstract. Well, I'm pleased to say that on the next slide, we will be revealing some more. So if we go into the detail a little bit more, Nick, one of the things that makes Wales so unique is just sort of the sheer diversity of natural landscapes it has to offer. As I say, this picture, I believe, is from something like mile 2 or 3 of the ride. I mean, could you sort of talk us through this list, the things that jump out for you in terms of some of the highlights and places people will go en route?
Yeah, and there's a lot packed within 3 days within here. You could spend so much longer exploring all these different areas. But as I said, this picture on the right hand side is where we'd start in Llandudno, is just tucked in behind this, over this kind of limestone promontory. It's called the Great Orme. This is a kind of a good example, I think, of when we were planning the route, something we didn't really know about until we got there. So we were looking for accommodation where everyone could stay in hotels the night before. It's simple. We want to get some investment back into the communities we're going through, and so Llandudno is a great spot, good transport links. But then suddenly you start planning the route, and you see this just incredible few-mile loop around this limestone headland, and this is how we kick off the ride, coming around this single-track road. And then to give you an idea, you kind of follow this round before turning south, and you've got Conwy Castle in front of you, one of the great kind of castles of the world, before you then dip into the edges of the kind of Snowdonia mountain ranges. And the landscapes are a fundamental part of this. And one of the best things about cycling is that you are not encased in a metal box or something like that. You are living, breathing, smelling, kind of exploring, powering your way up and down them. But from that point on, you've got incredible ancient mountains, you've got forest, we talk about Cambrian mountains here in the centre. They feel very, very different from up in Snowdonia. The Brecons again feel very different. So Black Mountains, they're kind of clustered together. We're doing some work with Visit Wales, and they're talking about kind of mountains and mines kind of infuse a lot of the culture of this land, but there's so much difference between them. So every single mountain range in here is totally different. And then You then get into valleys where you've got the sources of the Wye and the Severn. You know, anyone who's done RAB will have these memories of that incredible ride along by the River Wye. But we're right up at the source of these incredible rivers, and you're tucked down, riding along right next to them. And then you go through each of these within a single day. So you will be feeling like you're riding in a totally different landscape from pit stop to pit stop. And this was a really important part for us. We realized to capture that sense of the bubble, the kind of the magic, that connectivity, we couldn't have kind of transition sections. We couldn't have a 40-mile bit to link up one good bit here and one good bit there. And immediately when we came through this first bit, past the castle, you don't have any dead spots in this route, which is just amazing because you're getting every single mile that you're riding has something to give, right the way through to kind of final day where you crest over the top of Caerphilly Mountain, and then you drop down into Cardiff, and it's only about the last few miles you're in anything approaching suburbia before getting right to the centre of the city to finish, kind of near the stadium and the castle and the kind of central government buildings around there. So there's a huge amount in here. The landscapes are far more varied than you might think if you've only been to a couple of parts of Wales, but the variety in those 3 days is what I think will make this really, really special, along with that sense of remoteness, which, yeah, you feel privileged to be there. And there's not a lot of other people around. So, you know, we are guests in this incredible, incredible place.
Jasmine, you're familiar with a lot of Welsh cycling. Are there places on this list you'd want to single out and tell people to make sure to look out for?
Oh, I can't choose. Sorry. I really can't choose. I love all of it. Obviously, I'm most familiar with my immediate local area. But what I'm really excited about is a need to start around the Great Orme. I've been up to Snowdonia, but not at the Great Orme yet. So I'm really looking forward to riding that. I think in the Cambrian Mountains, it's that remoteness is also partially because there's a lot of like reservoirs there, and that ties in part of the history of why are those reservoirs there. It's very, very sparsely populated to create those reservoirs. There were agricultural communities there once upon a time. So yeah, learning more about that history of how that landscape was created will be important too. And then, yeah, to say, when I lived in London, I was training a lot on my turbo, but since I moved to Wales 3 years ago, I haven't touched the turbo one single time, because you just don't get traffic here. It's such beautiful, enjoyable experience of cycling. You might meet some sheep, but not a lot of cars.
Yeah, we couldn't do a presentation without mentioning sheep. Well, we've talked a bit about the history, so let's dive into that, because I think for people who've done Ride Across Britain, this is a real point of differentiation. The fact that this ride is going to be infused with Welsh culture, Welsh history, and everything that entails. Nick, could you talk a little bit about what people might be able to expect from that in that regard?
Yeah, and this is something which is quite different from RAB, because the nature of that 9 days and the variation in the culture from far north of Scotland to Cornwall, and the just sheer physicality of the journey and the commitment is everything was really focused on actually just getting people through every single stage and maintaining that momentum up the country. Whereas the shorter duration of this, plus the nature of the country we're riding through, allows us to do a lot more with this. So, I mean, the history of Wales, if you don't know it, is extraordinary, and there's a nice kind of flow of the way we go through from that, that far north up in the Great Orme. There's these incredible old copper mines up there, which were being mined back in kind of 1600 BC, right the way down through the middle of the country. We'll be going through kind of past areas like Offa's Dyke from the 8th century, going down through kind of Beddgelert with the legend of Llewellyn the Great and his dog and the rescuing of his child, right the way down through to Machynlleth, where we'll have one of our base camps. Knowing we've got some of the guys from Visit Wales on this ride, trying to get my pronunciation as tight as I can. Machynlleth, knowing that kind of Owain Glyndŵr was crowned first Prince of Wales in that landscape. So again, these are things which we've discovered in part after developing the route, or we've adjusted the route to take some of these places in, because like so first and foremost, this is a cycling event. But the more we've got involved in this, project, the more you realize there's so much more to tell. So the history ranging from, you know, the agricultural to the industrial, right the way through to kind of modern day Cardiff, which is at the cutting edge of kind of new technologies and things like that. You finish right in the middle of this dynamic growing city. The food and drink is amazing as well. So we're looking to source as much of that as possible from the local areas. So, you know, afternoon teas, you can expect your Welsh cakes, your Barra Briths, you know, your claw stews, things like this. So we're going to bring as much of that food and drink and flavour into it, right the way through to kind of the live music as well, and entertainment. Machynlleth is home to this amazing comedy festival. So we want as many bits of kind of old Wales and new Wales brought into this on the way down, as well as making sure that all of the communities we actually go through, we are working as closely with them as possible to make sure they benefit from this as well. You know, we realize it's a privilege to be traveling through these landscapes. So the more we can put into these communities and the economy of Wales when we go through, the better. So everything like all our supplier systems and things like that, we're looking to make sure as much of that goes into the Welsh economy as we can.
Jasmine, as our correspondent in the field, food is a big part of any culture, and of course, it's a big part of a cycle ride like this. Are there particular meals, particular foods that you think we should make sure to include as a resident of Wales?
Well, when you come to Brecon, it's also an army base, and we have the Gorgas training here. So actually, one of the best foods you can get around Brecon is Nepalese food. So
Wow.
it's not quite Welsh culture, but it's definitely culture of Brecon. I highly recommend it.
Nice. We've got a lot of people in the chat worrying about Welsh cakes, which we should definitely make sure to go in there. Let's talk a little bit about the wider support that you can expect on this ride. If you've done Ride Across Britain, you'll know that at Threshold, we really try and go the extra mile to create experiences that transcend just sport or an endurance challenge, and actually really bring people together. And a big part of that is just the level of support that we're able to provide. Perhaps anyone who's done RAB will know, I mean, anyone who's looking at this picture will know that we really do try and provide everything. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what people can expect on this ride.
Yeah, we're sticking with a very similar formula to what we've done before on RAB. You know, that was tweaked and adjusted over more than a decade, and thousands of you guys taking part in this. So we'll have the usual prep from before the ride, to making sure people know what's coming, they've got the right kit, preparation, training plans, webinars on the road, with the usual mix of fully signposted, chaperone riders, all the pit stops, mechanical support, medical support, and critically, the same kind of base camps that you would come to expect. So we've got 2 locations in Machynlleth and then also Brecon. So we've got 2 great locations there. The first night, this picture's it, Land's End, for those of you who recognise it. And I think that's probably the hardest tent to sleep in of any in the world, because it's your first night, you're fresh, all that anticipation. So we decided to have the first night will actually be, people can choose their own hotels up on that north coast in Llandudno, and then we'll have the 2 base camps with the whole RAB community brought together. And then the final night, when we come into Cardiff, people have the option to stay wherever they want as well. So we've got very similar provision to what you'd expect on RAB, but with that hotel on the start. And then because we finish in the middle of Cardiff, people can go and find their own overnights if they want to, which is quite a lot more choice than up at John O'Groats.
Jasmine, you've ridden some of the toughest rides out there. You've ridden North Cape Tarifa solo, unsupported, north to south in Europe. When you look back on your experience at RAB and the level of support that you received similarly on RideCymru, how much of a difference do you think that makes to the sort of experience of the ride?
Oh, huge difference. I think if you haven't experienced RAB, it's quite difficult to explain what that bubble feeling is like. But when you have, you love it. And when you do the unsupported rides on your own, you got none of that shared experience. Similarly with riding across Wales, actually one of my very first longer distance exploits was along Cymru, so riding the length of Wales back in 2011 on my own. And it took me 4 days. It was hard to find accommodation, and it was a beautiful ride. But you got so many of those like, this is so good. Look at this, look at that. You want to share those feelings. And I like the fact that with the threshold experience, you can do that. And the nature of this ride will be that it will split up quite a bit. You won't be riding in big pelotons because of the hills and the mountains, but you'll be surrounded by other people that you keep meeting along the route. And I think those people who've done RAP perhaps in the past and stayed in the hotels, I think this might also be an opportunity to have that full experience, because it's only 2 nights in a tent, and really be in the bubble for as long as possible. That quite excites me of the new ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it will feel slightly different because the 2 base camps we've got are right on the kind of within the hearts of these towns and communities as well. So in the past times we've had to have a base camp kind of quite isolated a long way off, but I think we'll have all the same facilities, but people will be able to go in, have a drink in the local pubs, pick up food and bits and pieces. So I think it will feel more closely integrated into those towns we're staying in, whilst hopefully protecting that sense of community, because we will arrive en masse, and you won't be able to walk down the street without spotting another rabbi or a RideCymru on the way down.
Yeah, we've got to work on that.
The side in Brecon I know quite well, actually. So you're right by the river, which is great. And you've got great views, but yeah, it's only a 5-minute walk if you want to get a pint in the town centre. It's perfectly located.
Yeah, this picture for me brings back a lot of fun memories, because this was my first experience of RAB. This was, as you said, the Land's End base camp. I remember walking through all those tents thinking, wow, this is really big. And then I went into the second field, which you can see in the back of shot, and thought, oh my goodness, it's so much bigger. But yeah, as you say, a little bit more embedded within the communities we'll be traveling through, which is going to be really exciting. We've had a few people commenting around getting to the start, getting to the finish. Charlie said he's up for riding back to his car, which is very impressive. But let's talk a bit about travel and logistics, because it is a real important thing. Nick, logistically, the start and finish of RideCymru, as you mentioned, they're quite a bit easier to reach, right, than Land's End and John O'Groats were.
And this was again a pretty fundamental reason of why we picked the start and finish points. Penzance and John O'Groats are amazing places to be, but they are not easy to get to. Whereas to get to the north coast and get back from Cardiff is very achievable, whether you are kind of across the centre or pretty much across the UK. It's as easy as access you can get to this kind of wilderness. So accessibility wise, obviously the duration, people can get there on the Thursday evening to register, and you should be finished on the kind of Sunday afternoon or early evening if you're stopping for more photos. So the actual time you've got to take off work is a lot less, but also travel wise, there are direct trains back and forth from London. Cardiff is around 2.5 hours from London. Llandudno is about an 1.5 hour drive from Manchester. You've got, for international riders where we've already had interest around this, it's easy access from kind of Heathrow, from some of those other airports as well. We want to get as many people kind of traveling and kind of celebrating the UK cycling scene. So imagine a lot of this will be UK riders, but actually I think once word gets out, they'll realise that this is a very different experience than a lot of what people will be used to if they're kind of used to riding in those traditional kind of Grand Tour landscapes. This has got so much character. It's a very, very different experience. And all the usual things will be helping with bike transport, rider transport, and things like that as well once we get towards the main event.
Yeah, Jeff in the chat has asked, is it Friday to Sunday or Saturday to Monday? Friday to Sunday, correct?
Yeah, so the riding is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, registration on the Thursday.
Yeah, so you could do it with just 1 day off work if you wanted. Let's talk a bit about partnerships then. If you've ridden with us before, you'll know that partners and charities are a massive part of bringing an event like Ride Cymru to life. Nick, would you like to say a bit more about the opportunities for charities and other organisations to get involved?
Yeah, so this is, anyone who's been on RAB, whether it be with Babel at the helm, whether it have been with Deloitte or some of the partners helping along the way, from Volvos to Teslas, from High Fives, that kind of RAB, or the RAB community, and what we're going to replicate with this in the Ride Cymru community, is an amazing group of people. We've got massive amount of kind of loyalty, engagement, and it's been an amazing platform for companies to get involved with RAB in the past. And we are kind of unashamedly appealing to partners to come and get involved with this event. I think the things which make this interesting for a variety of reasons are the fact it's a new concept, and there's very, very few new cycling events out there with any real scale. Unfortunately, the overall cycling market is actually quite healthy in terms of participation, but from an events perspective, there's very little based in the UK, which has been developed recently. So it's a clean canvas for a brand to come on and take maybe that title ownership of it. But also we've got all the lessons and all the things we've learned from partnering with either brands or large organizations since 2010. So the client engagement piece, inviting any of your target customers, anyone you're working with who loves their cycling, his or her cycling, the chance to host them in an event which is part of your kind of corporate DNA. The employee engagement piece as well, inviting all your employees along, be the cornerstone of all your health and well-being programs. If you've got charitable partnerships and things like charity partners as well, this we're expecting to be raising, once established, close to £1 million per year for charity. And again, it's a chance for an organisation to come in and enable all of that, and have that as one of your kind of flagship CSR investments. So we've got this blank canvas, which is amazing. We've got various conversations going on at the moment, from some brilliant apparel companies to kind of more of those cycling specific ones. People are keen to come and get involved with. And we've also already got a roster of brilliant charities lined up for this as well. So Alzheimer's Society, Cancer Research Wales, Macmillan, My Name's Doddie's Foundation, Parkinson's UK, Prostate Cancer, and Tommy's. We've got a couple of slots left in there as well. So from a charity perspective, we've got an amazing support for this already. And for anyone on the call is interested in having a discussion around how their company could come and get involved, there's options from those category partnerships, which are around that kind of 15,000 upwards, through to their title sponsorship. But these are significantly kind of lower cost than Ride Across Britain numbers as well. So if in doubt, just drop us a line. I'm very happy to have a listen to what you're trying to do and see if there's something there. But it's been amazing having those partners on board, and it's really exciting thinking there might be someone out there where this is the start of another journey which will take all those people and all that positivity we've seen with those other companies come through, but this time on the canvas of Wales rather than the UK.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that I just want to make sure we don't miss. So one was Andy asked about capacity, saying RAB was approximately 900 capacity. What are we aiming for on this event? Do we have a clear answer to that, do you think? Yeah,
so we're starting around, it's going to be similar to RAB in terms of those limitations. So we're starting around, well, we're doing the kind of pioneer event this September, but once we do the full launch with all the camping, it's going to be kind of 600 to 700, probably in that first year. But then it's got capacity subject to how things play out and what we learn in the first couple of years, up to around that kind of 900 mark as well on RAB. So it might go up a little bit, might come down a little bit, but it's going to be a similar scale, we imagine, to what we did on RAB.
And another question from Jenny: how does camping work? Do we have to carry our kit? Answer to that is no. I don't know if you want to expand on that, but we have we take your tents for you, and we will have an amazing team who erect all the tents every night and take them down. So you don't have to carry anything, just what you need for the day's riding.
Yeah.
A few people asking about dates and costs and entry and where can I sign up, which is lovely to hear. Let's take a look at this next slide, which outlines all of that for you. So September 2026, that's when we're launching the inaugural Ride Cymru. Entries for this are opening later on in the summer. If you're on this webinar, you've already registered your interest, so you will be amongst the first to know when those when those open. But we're going to be hosting this exclusive Pioneer ride later on this year. Nick, do you want to talk a bit about what that involves?
Yeah, so this is something which we want to do for a few different reasons. One is to give it a good test, run through all the systems, check everything works. We've got the ability to do this with hotels, so we're planning on recruiting around 50 people to take part in this, and that's going to be anyone who's keen to sign up, but also some places reserved for kind of special guests and also media partners and things like that. It will be, rather than the full signposted routes, it'll be guided groups with GPX support, all your mechanical support, medical support as you'd expect. There will be 3 nights in hotel accommodation. So that first night and then the 2 nights will be in hotels as well. So we won't have the big base camps, but we'll try and keep everyone together. The thing I think is interesting from this one and why we're putting this out to this community is knowing people who've done RAB or been engaged with RAB in the past will probably have the best sense of what we're trying to achieve with this. So to get 50 riders who've got an experience or a relationship with RAB will be a brilliant chance for those people to help us shape what this looks like. So there'll be feedback on everything from the routes, the landscapes, what we can do, what stories are interesting, how we can improve it. So the actual quality of the delivery is up to what you'd expect from a threshold perspective. So this is not a work in progress ride. We're delivering up to the same standard we would for any client event that we do for our bespoke rides. But we will be inviting or welcoming people's feedback on this as well. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting one from a team development perspective and an event development perspective. We're really excited to see and hopefully get a group of people on this. But obviously that comes, unfortunately, with the cost. We can't fund the whole thing. So pricing wise, it's based on RAB plus equivalents. So for twin rooms, it'd be 1,200 per person or 1,500 for a single room upgrade. But also all the charities are supportive of this as well. So they're very happy to do a lower entry price point. So 350 for a twin, 650 for a single, with a £1,600 fundraising commitment per person as well. So, we're aware this is, not the cheapest ride out there, and compared to the main event, when it's fully established and we can get those economies of scale, it's going to cost a little bit more. But hopefully within this group, there's some people in there who will be really fired up. And I know it's not about the jersey, but we will be doing an exclusive Pioneers jersey for this one, which will only be available for those people taking on that Pioneer ride as well.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect of any ride, of course, is the t-shirt. If you're interested in taking part in this Pioneer ride, the entries for that will go on sale on the 11th of March. So that's in a couple of Tuesdays' time. If you want to hear about it, you can obviously register your interest at the website, ridecymru.co.uk. And if you are interested in any partnership inquiries, as Nick was discussing, you can just drop us a line. The email address is on screen. Wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't plug our social media channels, so do make sure you follow us on Instagram, and the QR code down there on the screen will take you to our Facebook page as well, where we'll be posting all updates moving forwards. Up until now, it's been from the Ride Across Britain account, but we'll be taking that account forwards. We've got a bit of time for any more questions, so please do drop them in the chat. Phil has just asked, when will 2026 entries open? I don't think we have an exact date, do we, Nick? But we're looking at late summer.
Yeah, not fixed yet. So it's going to be subject to some of the partnership conversations going on at the moment, but we would expect probably between July and September. But if you're on the mailing lists and all of this kind of stuff, keep an eye on the social channels, you'll be the first to know. Like I said, it's good we're just keen to get as many of the kind of loyal RAB alumni being first to know about this kind of stuff, because you've been so good to us on RAB over the years.
Yeah. Stephen asks, is it first come, first served on the 11th of March? I think it will have to be, really. That's the only way we can do it. So we'll make sure you have a good run up, and we'll be very clear about the timings of all that if you do want to be first in line.
Yeah. So yeah, just if I can see some of the questions coming up. So one of the questions around Andy. So we're chatting to Andy about potential involvement in this, But again, part of these larger conversations all around local suppliers as well. So yeah, keen to get as much continuity as we can. But final supplier decisions haven't been made yet. But yeah, like I said, we want to get as many familiar faces as we can onto these events.
Penelope's asking, has she missed dates for 2026? We haven't actually had the exact dates on screen, but we're looking mid-September, is that right?
Yeah, it's one of 2 weekends in mid-September as well. So we're looking at a couple of different finish options at the moment. So yeah, as soon as we know that, that'll be locked in as well, so we can let you guys know.
Yeah. Gareth asks, if you want to take part in 2025, when would you know if you're selected? So it won't be a selection process. It will be an open entry. So it will be clearly communicated to you ahead of time.
Yeah.
Question here, Jasmine, that you might be able to answer. What's the steepest climb? Obviously, you haven't ridden this exact route front to back, but are there any that from that list we saw earlier come to mind?
Well, I haven't seen the route in detail yet, so it'd be hard to comment. Obviously, there was some steep stuff in Snowdonia, but you have fresh legs, so don't worry about that. And then Gospel Pass is not that steep. It's got a bit of a ramp, but on balance, it's an easy climb as climb goes. So don't have to worry about that either. There are very few climbs that are above 20%, but there are also very few climbs that are below 10%. So that gives you an idea of what to train for, somewhere between 10 and 20% gradient.
Yeah, Gospel Pass, for people who don't know, the highest paved road in Wales. So very exciting to be climbing up that. Phil asks, would you consider increasing 2025 entries if demand is there?
The limit on this one is around capacity in hotels. So this will be slightly dependent on twin rooms and single rooms. So I'll have an allocation of both. So if demand is high, my suggestion would be, if you know someone you'd be happy to room with for a few nights, your best chance is coming in, or you've got a better chance probably of coming in those twin rooms as well. But we're looking at different options. What we kind of feel like that 50 to 60 mark is probably the best in terms of locations and proximity from hotels. But if the demand is really high, we can always look if there's scope to adjust everything, and the exact route might tweak slightly so we can finish in a slightly different location than where the base camp would be. Obviously we want as many people to be able to take part as we can, but there's a limit. Just like we said, the reason we like this is it's unlocking that central part of Wales, and one of the reasons it's not as popular, or chicken and egg, there's not that much hotel accommodation in there for anything much larger than the numbers we're talking about. I see Suzanne as well, just asking about Pioneer Ride hotel stays. So we'd have 3 nights, so the Thursday night in Llandudno, and then Machynlleth and Brecon, but the Cardiff night would be up to you where you stay, so that wouldn't be included in the price.
Someone did ask, is there a medal? And I think we can categorically say yes. It wouldn't be right to not have one.
Sorry.
Go, yeah.
I'm just seeing a few questions coming through in here, some of them specifically. Considered riders joining 25 that have their own accommodation, like a motorhome. I think I'm not saying a definitive no, but unlikely, just because we're going to have a tighter team, and we're going to be really focused on making sure all these things are ironed out. So we'll probably try and keep things as simple as possible. So unlikely to do motorhomes for that one. But again, we'll ask the team and see what's possible. There's a question from Andy about the length of each day's stage. Does it allow for a slightly later start time compared to RAB? Again, these are all things which we'll probably refine over the course of that Pioneer ride. We think it will give us a bit more flexibility. So if you look at the first couple of days in RAB, the elevations are kind of 9.6 and 8.1 thousand feet of elevation. So we are a shorter distance and slightly less elevation. So it should be a bit quicker and gives a bit more flexibility. But we would always err on the side of a slightly earlier start and give ourselves a bit more at the back end of the ride, rather than people misjudging it and then riding in the dark. So probably a bit more flexibility, but I wouldn't be planning long lines.
Yeah, someone's asked about a minimum speed for that Pioneer ride. Maybe something that we can't necessarily declare just yet, but what are your thoughts around that?
I think I'm keen to get a range of different abilities on that. So that'll be part of the thing when we do registration, so we can get people into groups and things. It's not about getting a load of elite riders to race it through and say that is easy. We need to try and replicate, or ideally, just by default, we'll have a range of different people on there of different speeds. So it would be similar speeds and fitness expectations to Ride Across Britain, which I think off the top of my head was kind of 10 to 12 miles an hour average, but it's been a while. I have to check that.
Yeah. Someone asked, did wonder if someone would ask about the golden jersey, which is something that if you do 3 Ride Across Britons, you get. We're not planning on this being part of that because, as you said, Ride Across Britain is not actually necessarily gone for good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Just seeing if there's any more questions. Can we accommodate cyclists with neurodivergencies? Absolutely, yeah. We can definitely make sure that's taken into account.
Then what we need to do, any specific requirements, we just need to know in advance and have a conversation to make sure we can support with whatever's required. But as a starting point, we've got a good track record of being able to flex to be able to support people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like we've addressed most of the questions, unless there's any you've spotted, Nick, that you'd like to touch on.
I've just seen one from Jenny about the full list of inclusions for the Pioneer Ride. So that will be updated and posted onto the website in advance of it going live. But it would be, again, same as RAB. So all your food, breakfast, food on the road, dinners, but it's pretty much everything except posh lattes and cappuccinos and alcohol, which are at your pleasure.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, if you do have any more questions, just drop us a line on the email address that you can see on your screen, or obviously on social media, and we're happy to get back to you to answer them. As I say, the Pioneer Ride will go on sale on the 11th of March, and we'll make sure that we give you due notice as to the exact time that will go live. So I think all that remains is for me to thank Nick and thank you, Jasmine, for joining me this evening. Super exciting that this is now out there and in the world, and can't wait to see how it progresses moving forward.
Yeah. And I just want to say another thing as well, because I've seen a few names pop up who have dialed in, who've been really helpful in helping shape this as well. These don't just kind of spring fully formed out of the threshold. So there's lots of people we've had conversations with who've pointed us in the right direction, given us guidance. So those people are on the call. You'll know who they are. But yeah, it's massively appreciated. Exciting to get to this point. And yeah, looking forward to seeing who's going to be joining us this September.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.